You are very welcome indeed to Happy Times and Places, which is a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast. The wheeze is simple. I get a special guest to choose a Doctor Who story. In secret, they nominate their favourite things about it. I have to watch the episodes, commentate along, and guess what those favourite things are.
Hello, Toby, and listeners to Toby's podcast. My name is Ben. Like Toby, I'm a writer for Doctor Who magazine. I've also co-written a couple of books with Russell T Davies, the Writer's Tale books, still available. The serial that I've chosen for you to watch is Survival. I really did struggle to whittle it down to just 4. I have, for the purpose of this parlour game, so as not to break your podcast, I have whittled it down.
Well, hello everybody. Thanks to Ben Cook, who you saw introduce, you heard, apologies podcast listeners, this will become a video eventually, but if you're having only the oral experience, keep an eye on my YouTube channel, but it will probably be some time because the videos take longer to put together and more people digest them in this easier manner of just having them, these golden observations poured into your ears. But Benjamin Cook, mover and shaker of all things young and modern and internet-flavoured, and also an experienced interviewer and writer of and about Doctor Who, has added a bit of glamour to these otherwise becardigans. And I'm in a cardigan and corduroy this evening. All I need now is loafers and a slight air of defeat, and the image. I actually have that last one. Anyway, I'm trying to soldier on and be. I'll get a tattoo at the end of this, but until then, we're gonna do something that was on when I was in the grip of my youth. What was I? 1989. I was 15 years old. I had hormones coursing through me. I had worries hither and thither, hope for the future. Did I? I don't know. But I also had mates, and it was, we were doing things, and we were all quite creative, and we had parties, and it seemed like life was ours, because I think you feel like that when you're a teenager. I remember saying to a friend of mine, a couple of years later, this is our time, this is the time before we have any responsibilities and stuff like that. And yet there was so much terror around every corner, peer groups and authority and, what life was going to make of us. And if one knew now what one knew then, well, one probably wouldn't have had as much fun. But anyway, a lot of water under the bridge between then and now. But this was the last episode of Doctor Who for quite some time, although I didn't know it at the time. But let's see what it has in store for us as we press play in 3, 2, 1. And here we go. There we go. And I've got a confession to make that I alluded to last time. I'm not saying the universe revolves around me, like this spinning galaxy on the Sylvester McCoy title sequence. But, I wouldn't set my video for Doctor Who. I had to watch it live, and I had to record it live, because these were for posterity. These were going to be my recordings that would get me through the dark times, because I had to watch Doctor Who over and over and over again. I would take my videos to teenage parties so that when it was all over, or the next morning, I'd put Doctor Who on and, hope to convert my mates. Oh, they were very... But anyway, and only a few weeks before this, I'd missed episode 3 of The Curse of Fenric because it was parents' evening at school, and I'd made my friend, we had a grown-up friend who lived not far away, Derek, come round and record it, because I didn't want to set it on the timer, because I needed a clean cut and I needed no fat in between the episodes. No, I didn't want to sully it with whatever it was, Rockcliffe's Folly. No, that was on afterwards. The one show hadn't been invented yet, but Wogan or whatever. And I remember my friend came around and he did Curse of Fenric for me, and he missed the first 3 seconds because he didn't do what I asked him, which is what you do is you press pause and record, and then you unpause, and that means you get a clean cut. Whereas if you just press record, you get a kind of blah, blah, blah. And he did do that, because I didn't get... It wasn't an unclean cut, but he missed the first couple of seconds of the title sequence. And of course, I got the title sequence on every single other episode. But I had it in my head, but what if this is the last episode left, and it's missing a few precious seconds, and it could be recreated, but it's not quite the same. It had to be that title sequence, and of course, actually, even the versions we have now aren't that title sequence. They're remastered or whatever. And is anyone different in different episodes? Of course not. They're the same thing, but it was that one. I needed that one. That's how my brain works. In case you needed an insight, but I was in love with a girl called Lizzie, but it was very much a platonic relationship. It was a bit like Kara and Ace, just to try and bring it back to what we're seeing now. But I loved this girl, and we were friends, and she would come and stay, but we never got up to no good. But she had my heart, and she confided in me. She had troubles at home and stuff like that, and I was her sort of shoulder to cry on. So it was quite an intense relationship, but never the girls wanted to be my friend. That's a great effect. Well, it's effect. It's what are they called? Contact lenses, but it's very well done, and I like the way they cut from his normal eyes and his cat eyes. But anyway, my friend Lizzie phoned, and she had something to. I remember my friend John Warburton phoned up at the beginning of Tooth and Claw, and I just picked up the phone and said, "Doctor Who's on, go away," and put the phone down again. But with Survival 3, someone came in and said, "Is your friend Lizzie on the phone?" I mean, she should have known not to call when Doctor Who was on, but because I'd done the record pause thing, the title sequence was on, and I'm really edgy when Doctor Who's on. I mean, I've berated my kids for, doing something out of the corner of my eye. Oh, I've been awful. So full of many regrets about how I've behaved, but on edge because everything has to go right with Doctor Who. Everything has to be perfect. But for some reason, with this last episode, I went to my friend's aid, and she chatted and offloaded, and we talked and blah, 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 blah. So I missed the broadcast of this. I knew it was safe. I was recording it, and I'd recorded the trailer, and blah, blah. Everything was in place. Everything was fine. And I watched it later that evening, or almost immediately after. But I betrayed Doctor Who for a woman. And as a result, Doctor Who was cancelled. That's my feelings on the matter. So I'm sorry, Doctor Who, because it's all my fault. But this is really this sort of sexual awakening stuff that they're doing, I think, is really interesting storytelling. Rare to have a female writer, rare to represent these sorts of things within Doctor Who, and to do it, using metaphor and character, and it's quite grown up, albeit it's somebody dressed as a teddy bear, but it's played with absolute sincerity. And I was sort of joking like a child saying cat lesbian last week, but actually, this all paves the way to when Doctor Who comes back, because this is all done in. Even the sort of feral kids are all sort of rather middle class. They're even though Dave John is actually a genuine North London boy, I know that, but it's still sort of all seen through a sheen of acting and of drama, and that's not because anyone's doing anything wrong. It's the way that things were presented in those days, and it paved the way for what we have now. And we have a show that is much more representative, and representation matters and is important. And I think sort of connecting with the people that are watching and talking about their preoccupations, I think is really interesting. That this is the path towards doing that. And Lisa's great. She, her body language is very good. She's acting the part from fingers to toes, from paw to paw, and it's great that they trust. You've got a companion you can do this stuff with, and she's great at showing the turmoil, and he's very good at the sort of dark melancholy that he brings to the part, which is odd because he's also a clown, a very adept clown. And I really like this relationship that they have, because he's very comforting there, but actually he's also very dark and very manipulative. It's not an easy morality there in the way that he sort of he looks after her, but he's also manipulating her. And I remember one of my drama teachers who'd watched The Curse of Fenric saying, when he sort of talked about her being an emotional cripple and all of that sort of stuff, he said, this is quite powerful stuff. And that always made me feel good when a teacher said a thing. But yes, this is. I'm glad they all make it. I sort of expected Derek to sort of die, maybe, but I'm quite glad he makes it back. And for Doctor Who of the time, just having a character who was played by an actress of colour, seemed like a breakthrough. Seemed like a step forward into the future, and quite right too. But as a young liberal at the time, this is a really important aspect of this, and it absolutely is, and yet it's still, there are still arguments had, aren't there, when you see you only have to see a black policewoman in something, and there's usually somebody on Twitter going, "Oh, why does the policewoman have to be black?" And so it just actually underlines the importance of of representation on screen, because there are still some people who think that they are the norm, and anything other than that is some sort of aberration or imposition. But it's and that's it for Derek, isn't it? I think Derek and Shrila. Now Dave John, who's a lovely fella, is Sylvester is the godfather to his children, or the other way around. Dave is the godfather to one of Sylvester's kids, but they're great mates. They'd done work together before. I think Sylvester got Dave the job, which is nice, because that doesn't happen as often as you'd think. You've got a mate in a thing and they suggest you for it. I'm still waiting. Well, but that it doesn't happen as often as you'd think. Oh yes, and of course they're. Oh yeah, so he's got to nick the bike. This is why he got the part, actually, because, well, not the only reason, but they needed somebody who could ride a bike, and I think he'd auditioned for a Casualty, which I think Paul Reynolds got the job in the end. It's a Casualty episode that Christopher Benjamin's in, that Alan Waring had directed, and he didn't get it, but then he did get this one. Another dead cat teddy bear. But this feels really immediate. That's not great, is it? I mean, quite kudos to them for going, let's try and do a scene where there's a disemboweled cat. And this is Adele Silva, who I'm delighted is on the DVD of this, who went on to be a major star in Emmerdale. Squeak. And they brought her, and I think she was quite. I remember on the DVD commentary. On the DVD documentary, and the DVD commentary for this is actually a delight, because they have Clayton Hickman and some fans. They do a fan commentary, which to me at the time was the idea. Fans being involved. I don't want to hear fans and a moderator. Oh God, I thought I just want to hear from the people that were on it. And actually, I then listened to it, and they're very funny about these tough gym guys who are anything but, and Clayton Hickman's very funny on it, and it's a nice bunch on it, and I remember going, why didn't I want fans on a commentary? It's a perfectly legitimate thing to do, especially as it's not replacing another commentary, and I had great fun it, and I've since met at least one of those fans. But yeah, I still had when this came out on DVD, I still had a certain amount of self-loathing. I didn't know fans aren't legitimate. Of course they are. And it was really all about myself. Don't worry. The fan experience of the show is I actually really like hearing about now what people were going through when they saw a story or how it connected to them. I love that bit with Ace going down and the eyes and the kid going bad Catman. I think that's really evocative and effective. Look at that camera angle. That's just really nicely shot through the glass and from slightly underneath, so he's leering over it, and her going down on her knees and coming up. And look at that backdrop. It's quite a grim backdrop. and they do look a bit like they're doing a warm up for Act 1 of West Side Story rather than doing boxing and karate. And he looks like somebody's tried to make the Fonz out of the 1980s. But he's got a great face. He's good casting because he's got a great face for it. And I love the one that points. Yeah, I got a bit of business, They asked me to point, but they do look like they should. They should be on top of the pops, don't they? These boys. Oh, and poor old Patterson. And I remember complaining that I thought Patterson had an ignominious death, and my mum corrected me and going, "It's ignominious." The look on his face is great there. He you get the real sense of fear from Patterson here in his final moments, and this is pretty grim. It dispenses with its supporting cast fairly quickly, so. You've lost Shrieler and Derek, who've just gone home. It's quite an odd thing to happen, really, isn't it? And Patterson's been killed. And I like the fact that line could be delivered quite harshly. I think Tom Baker would have been fairly dismissive when I never quite liked it when he's like that, although I do appreciate the alienness of it can be very effective. But I think the Doctor should always be a little sad if someone's died, and there's so much for the SAS course delivery there. Sylvester had a sort of grim melancholy about him that I liked. Well done that, because that she didn't have to blink then. The eye came and went. And this feels to me now that I know what I know, this is I know where Doctor Who ends, and that's great. Look at that. That's fantastic. Even though the kids from Fame are flanking the motorbike Fonz. But it doesn't matter. I like it. That it's only just occurred to me that it's the kids from Fame flanking motorbike Fonz. It's a slightly wobbly tooth, that. But I love the fact that, of course, Ace needs to fight, and Dominic Glynn's with it as well. And I think this is amazing. This bit, the payoff is reprehensible, but I love this bit because it's fantastic, and it's really, how the hell are they going to get out of this? What's happening here? And the Doctor's, replaced Ace because she must not fight because of what will happen to her. And this, you go, what on earth? Wow, what? That's amazing. The two motorbikes have crashed into each other and exploded. And you didn't see either man blown clear. You just saw the explosion. And this shows the harshness of the policy. But I do quite like the Masters. The Masters sort of care for Midge in a way. It's a totally practical and pragmatic arrangement, but I like his, the goodbye and all of that sort of thing, the slightly sort of, it's not paternalistic, it's a man in charge of his creature, and I like the fact that he shows in his own way a little bit of sort of reaction to the death of Midge. He's not sad about it, but he acknowledges Midge's good behaviour, and this is, again, she's going to be killed by a dance troupe, but here comes Lisa Bowerman, who does not know what she's let herself in for, and she's been a great servant to Doctor Who via the big finishes, and she's great in although, and she's directed a few as well. Very, very, I think very, very highly of Lisa Bowerman, but I like her costume. But yes, I you know, I'm feeling quite sort of emotional about this now, because this plane, this hilltop or wherever it is, this is where I know Doctor Who ends. But we didn't at the time. Oh no, because actually the story hasn't ended yet. It goes away a little bit first, because he fights the Master in the car park, and I think the trailer for this had the Master and the Doctor fighting in the fire, so I knew there was still a bit to come. Do you bleed? Very good. But this is so, because he's going to kill her, and this is awful, and really sad. Oh dear. Oh, and good cat noises. He's so horrible, the Master. But he is like a cat. But unfortunately, this is where it gets, because there's been no setup of this. Sylvester does like sticking his bum in the air. It's not one of his finest qualities. I mean, there's no attempt to explain what has happened there. What's supposed to have happened is that the bikes crashed into each other, and Midge was flown one way, and the Doctor was flung over there and landed on the sofa. It's quite often in 80s Doctor Who, you'd be really willing a story to work and not to have a moment that you'd have to then justify to your friends at school the next day. And quite often, I had a whole thing in one of my shows about the giant rat. There was always one element of a Doctor Who story that spoilt it. There's always just the spectre of disappointment. I'm glad we got to see Lisa Bowerman's face. That's not her hair, though. That's a wig. But I'm glad we got to see Lisa Bowerman's face. And as I say, I remember being really excited she was in it, because she'd been a regular in Casualty. I never thought that one day I'd meet her. How exciting. And I think, you know, this is a great showdown. I think it's really well done. There's a real simmering power. Are you frightened yet? To Ainley, and you know, McCoy really knows how to stand up against despotism. He's you know, for all that bird-like melancholy that he has, and that clowning, he's holding the stare here. He's you know, he's prepared to really dig deep for that authority. I think this is great. This really feels like, even though we weren't to know it, if this had been the end of Doctor Who, even though it's a sort of three-parter set largely on the streets of Monday London, it does feel, I think, you know, I think it is a fitting end to the show, partially because of this. You know, if we fight like animals, we die like animals. You know, that takes us well, in fact, and the Doctor nearly kills the Master as Tsar kills Cal in the very first story. But you know, this whole thing about you know, whether we should fight, although it's a complex morality, of course, because you know, you should fight for what you believe in, and sometimes you're given no choice but to fight. So I'm no simplistic peacenik who just goes, oh well, if you know, because sometimes, you know, you do have to. I'm afraid you do have to arm yourselves against tyranny, and that's, you know, I'm more pragmatic about that than I probably was when I watched this, when the world I lived in was much simpler. Now this Michelle Martin was, for many years, there was a rumor amongst those of us who look for Doctor Who actors that she died, but I believe that's not the case now, and somebody's found her playing neighbour. But yes, so whilst I am peacefully inclined. I think unquestioning pacifism is fine until somebody tries to invade your country. Do you know what I mean? I still would always prefer and advocate a more peaceful solution than a fighty one. So that's why this the message of this, I think, is important. But I think Doctor Who itself acknowledges that in sometimes the Doctor's actions, that the Doctor is not somebody who doesn't always fight. But I think bringing us back to present day London, with an interesting teenager, and the subtext of what this story talks about, is a fitting. But that and the very first Doctor Who story, I think, are bookends that match, despite the passage of time and change in technology and change in personnel and change in ways of storytelling. If just looking at Doctor Who's history fitting together and the way that it leads into the Russell T Davies iteration of Doctor Who, I think it's actually, for a programme that's higgledy-piggledy and like crazy paving, is a nice fit. And the fact that they had time to do this nicely written coda, and go up and finish Doctor Who. Ooh. I know. It's because the loss of Doctor Who was big for me, and I was so angry about it for so many years. But I suppose watching it now, it's a little. I'm my love for Doctor Who is genuine, and it's got me through a lot of very difficult times, and I love it even for its faults, even for its bits that don't work. And I think I've learnt over the years to be a bit less angry about the things that disappoint me about it. But it was only an anger based on fear. It was an anger based on worry that it would be snatched away. Ever since the hiatus, Doctor Who seemed to be always on the verge of being snatched away, and it had gone from being a programme that everybody watched and everybody talked about and everyone was in awe of, to being a bit of a national joke, not just amongst my peers, but in the way that was talked about on television, even by the corporation that made it. There was this sort of arrogant rejection and ignorance about its past and about its achievements, and about what an achievement it was, and what a worldwide reach it had, and the injustice of that. It made me so furious. But of course, that was a mirror of perhaps other things going on in my life. And so the fact that Doctor Who stopped was a great injustice to me as well. It was the injustice of it, I think, that informed much of my sort of younger life. And I look back now and wish that I'd perhaps been able to compartmentalize things a bit better. But I love Doctor Who, and I'm so glad it came back. And there were times when I never thought it would. But I can now also look at that and go, well, that was in terms of where Doctor Who stopped. It could have just stopped any old how. Do you know what I mean? I think there's at least a vague, although hastily cobbled together at the last minute, sense of occasion and sense of ending. And I think what Andrew Cartmel brought to that era of the show, and what that Doctor and companion relationship did, I think was really interesting. And of course, it led to things in the New Adventures as well. That a lot of the aspects of that and those characters got a new and different lease of life. So well done, Survival. Well done. What's my favourite bit about episode 3 of Survival? Well, I think that when all is said and done, it's a fitting and decent end, and it gets that coda, it gets that little speech from the Doctor that is very, very sweet and mercurial and offbeat, and yet sort of says, this is a little bit special, but talking about things that people don't really understand. and that's, its specialness is that Doctor Who exists in a universe and a world all of its own. It's a stupid program if you broke it down to what it is, about an alien travelling through space and time in a police box that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. What a stupid sounding idea, and yet it contains such magic. It contains vim and vigour and adventure and imagination and all sorts of possibilities. It does, I think, have a liberal streak through it, at least, about not. And that sometimes you can make the case that actually it's about saying anything different is a scary thing that's bad for you. But I think because of the nature of the people who've written it and the people who've created it, that through all the trappings of the action and adventures and the need for jeopardy and the need for baddies, that the way it goes about its business, I think, as a decency and a fairness and an imagination about it. And a sense of fun and a sense of energy and a sense of humour, and it's made up of all sorts of different things that you don't get anywhere else. I don't think you do, and tied in with that, with the nostalgia, with the fact that it, for people of my age and older, and a few younger, not quite so many, it was threaded into the DNA of our formative years, of our growing up, and when the world is as scary as it's ever going to be, but also has as many possibilities. And that's what Doctor Who is. Doctor Who is childhood. The world is scary, but it's also wondrous, but it's also uncertain, and the future is ahead of you and at your fingertips. I love Doctor Who. I really do. Well, I couldn't have spent so much time thinking about it and doing things about it if I didn't, I guess. But I'm not ashamed, and it's not, and as I say, it's not, for all my talk of, the childish jokes I might have done during this, for which I apologise. I don't do them very often. I don't look at it askance. I'm not lofty and disdainful about it, going, I like it because it's so rubbish or any of that. No, I like it because it's great. I have to acknowledge that sometimes bits don't work, but my God, do you know how hard it is to write an episode of Doctor Who? It's hard. Getting the requisite amount of adventure, exposition, explaining your new world, explaining your new aliens, explaining what the threat is, putting those all into a story with characters that maybe as well has metaphor and subtext and all of that sort of thing, and still making it an adventure that makes sense, which has highs and lows, and in certain cases, a climax every 25 minutes or whenever it is, and to make it multi-camera on videotape in the way that soap operas are made. It's not a film. And to retain that sense of charm and strangeness and that indefinable magic. Yeah, I love Doctor Who, and I presume you do too. And I know Ben Cook does, but what does he love about Survival? Oh, no, because I need to say what I love about Survival 3 and my bonus thing. Well, no, I mean, my thing is that was the end of Doctor Who, and I think it's as... And actually, if they'd had more build-up, they might have done something huge and cataclysmic. And I actually quite like the fact that because it was only he was only resting in the end, the note on which it ended, I think was as good as we could have hoped for. And my thing all over, it has to be Alan Waring. I think he's such a good director. I really think his direction is a high point of this period of Doctor Who. I think he composes pictures well. I think he casts with great sensitivity, gets good performances, but he's got such a good eye and such a good sense of pace, and I really think he does everything possible to make those episodes look better than whatever else is on telly at the time, whilst not having the requisite resources. So those are my two things. They won't be Ben Cook's. I've already lost this one. But, nothing is lost forever. Haha.
So my favourite thing about part 3 of Survival, and I know this is an obvious choice, I'm sorry, but not that sorry, because it's the Doctor and Ace, Sylvester and Sophie, who, when I was 12 years old, were my favourite Doctor and companion. Individually, they are amazing, but together there is something just exquisite. Not just chemistry, but alchemy. I loved them when I was 12 years old, and I love them today. My bonus favourite thing is I am struck every time I watch Survival by how perfect it is as not just a season finale, but as a finale to all of Doctor Who. Had John Nathan Turner and Andrew Cartmel known it was going to be the last Doctor Who serial for God knows how long, and they maybe had an inkling, I think, but they didn't know for sure, they would have made very different choices. In fact, any production team before or since tasked with having to finish off Doctor Who would have gone for some grand finale. They would, imagine what Russell or Stephen or Chris would have done, the Doctor returning to Gallifrey. It would have been like Lungbarrow, essentially, or Daleks versus Cybermen. And instead what we get is Survival, which is so much more understated and beautiful, and works as a final Doctor Who story. We talked about the time and place in which it is set, returning to modern-day London for one of the first times since the very first Doctor episode, An Unearthly Child, but also tonally and thematically, as poncy as it sounds, dealing with, survival for a show that was about to be off air for the best part of, 16 years, and yet survived. Dealing with children who go missing, lost youth, the way we remember or forget the people and the things that we love. I think what I'm trying to say is that if anyone had planned a finale to the first 26 years of Doctor Who, Survival wouldn't have been it. And yet Survival works all the better as a finale to all of Doctor Who by the fact that it didn't know that's what it was going to be. Even, and I'll stop talking in a minute, Toby, I promise, even that final speech, there were worlds out there where the sky is burning, wouldn't have worked as well had it been dubbed onto the end of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, or been delivered by the Sixth Doctor at the end of the Trial of a Time Lord, or if Revelation of the Daleks had ended up being the final Doctor Who story, and it very nearly was. You couldn't have ended with there were worlds out there with the sky. You just couldn't. And yet with Survival you could, and it works perfectly. To paraphrase an old Gary Gillett DWM article, Survival is almost enough to make you believe in the existence of God. So for all those reasons and hundreds more, I love Survival. And I love you, Toby. I think you're brilliant. Thank you for inviting me on this podcast. I hope I haven't talked too much. Stay safe. I should probably end with, if we fight like animals, we'll die like animals. I should get down on my knees, except it's going to be out of shot, and I've got the camera precariously balanced on top of several books and a laundry basket, so I won't do that. But goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Oh, I'm flattered. Ben even knows who I am. Yes, and bless him, again, if you're just on the audio of this, Ben edited in 2 pictures of himself as a 12-year-old with Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred, which I just adore. Thanks to him, and yes, he's quite right, and we are actually in accord, so I get a point for this, because we both said because it was the finale of Doctor Who, but I think we both sort of stumbled across the same reasons as well. That actually it's a great finale because it wasn't planned as a finale, and again they got an inkling towards the end, and that speech was bunged on, but the story wasn't built around being a finale, and yet but by accident it somehow seems just so appropriate and apposite, but also it's a great foreshadowing of what was to come. Interestingly, that it's almost become, by a curious weird osmosis, this bridge between the classic and the new Doctor Who, and it's matured. As I say, I thought it was fine. I thought it was okay. It was not a story I disliked at the time, but it was not. I was doing cartwheels over The Curse of Fenric, which I think is a great story, but it's much more traditional, actually, Curse. But I'm saying nothing to dismiss curse, as you'll find when I do it for this. I will find it very easy to eulogize, and don't interrupt me while I'm doing so, the curse of Fenric. But I'm quite moved by what survival is and what it represents, and actually the intent behind it, what Andrew Cartmel was trying to do with Doctor Who and what the whole production team were doing, it was actually quite modern and forward thinking for the time as well. The television landscape then was very different from now. Yeah, and it's opened up quite a few little memories and emotions that I'd maybe had locked away, and obviously a lot of time has passed since then and now, and a lot of connections. Funny that Will Barton was there actually at another great crossroads in my, when I interviewed him. As I say, it was my last day in that London flat, and then because Who's Round is something I did as I was going through the end of a relationship and a divorce, and so I sort of associate Will with that, with another end of an era many years later that involved a woman. So maybe survival is always the crossroads between me into a rather sad and difficult time from which I eventually emerge and survive. So God, I hope watching it now I hope something awful doesn't happen tomorrow or in the next few weeks. Well, if it does, this is why. We're in survival. It's cursed for me. It's cursed, I tell you. But the lesson is, of course, through both of those things, you have to keep going. And Doctor Who has always helped me to keep going through those dark times. I wonder how Lizzie is. I've seen her a few times since. I think she's happy. How funny. Anyway, let's not get self-indulgent. If we can get less self-indulgent than a man talking very personally about his reactions to an episode of Doctor Who. But that's what you signed up for, folks. I hope that whatever memories survival prompts in you are happy ones. But I think that's the appeal of Doctor Who, isn't it? It's not just that we watch it. It's that when we watch it, we remember. We remember where we were. We remember who we were, what we were thinking. And as time, which it does, moves on, it keeps those things alive. So as we travel inexorably, sadly, only in one direction, and I find that quite scary at 48, thinking of something being relatively recent because it's an episode of Doctor Who I watched when I was 15. Good God. So it's... Yeah, well, let's not go there. But as we travel in time in only one direction, Doctor Who has little stop-off points for us to happy times and happy places. And sometimes you only realise they were happy when you look back on them and go, oh, I should have appreciated them for what they are. Or I shouldn't have been so scared. It was all right. Or I shouldn't have been so angry. That's not the way to deal with life. Yeah, I think Doctor Who makes us look back, doesn't it? And as we look, because we look back and we remember how we felt and what we thought then, it gives us a sort of perspective. And I hope, therefore, a bit of happiness, where otherwise there might not be any. I might just be talking about myself here. You might all be very cheerful people who just watch Doctor Who and quite enjoy it. So sorry about that. My thanks to Benjamin Cook, who flatters me by his presence on this. Do check out The Writer's Tale if you haven't. It's an absolutely brilliant book on Doctor Who, and I'm sure as long as there is Doctor Who, there will be Benjamin Cook chronicling it and also prospering outside of the world of Doctor Who. So good for him. And thanks to him, and thanks to you for listening. And we will survive. Take care. Thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest this time around is Benjamin Cook. Do check him out on Twitter at Benjamin_Cook. And I'd also like to thank all of the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Andy Case, John Curley, Mark Dakin, John Elledge, Sam Estirem, Gary Gillett, James Gould, Lisa C. Greco, David Green, Fraser Gregory, Dave Hoskin, Jessica Jones, Andrew Jordan, Ashley Knight, Clive Lewis, Guy Lambert, James Lark, Gavin McLean, David Matthewman, John McClay, Ross McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, Matthew Newton, Dave Owen, Melvin Pena, Keith Perry, Jonathan Potter, Kevin Parker, Richie, Dylan Rees, John Rivers, Mark Sandham, Jim Sangster, Matt Sawyer and Keith Say. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Oh, I just ran out of time to say, and Stephen Smith, aka Dalek Fan. That's my favourite patron name at the moment. I wish more patrons had an aka name, because you can really have fun with those. Just saying them, it's much more fun to say Stephen Smith, aka Dalek Fan, than Stephen Smith. Do you know what I mean? And to the extent there that actually Stephen has then just had 2 mentions. You mean Stephen Smith, aka Dalek Fan? Love it. So if you are a patron, or if you want to become a patron, as well as getting bonus material and advance releases, you'd have heard this podcast 6 months earlier if you'd been a patron, and some exclusives, as I say, and special access and all sorts of other things. You can do that at £3 a month, and you can also get an AKA added to your name if you so desire. £3 a month is the lowest tier, and that gets you most things. It's fairly, most things are available at entry level, although there are the odd trinket to lure you further up the ladder. But you also get a 10% discount on any of the tiers if you sign up for a year in one go. But I know times are tough, and I know a monthly commitment can be daunting. So there is Ko-fi, where you can make a one-off donation if you think I sound like I need some caffeine or nourishment or just a boost, a metaphorical or actual chocolate bar. And that's at ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. But I know times are difficult, and I know that I listen to loads of podcasts for free, and that's the nature of the beast. I am grateful to the listeners. I'm constantly flabbergasted by the amount of people that take their time to listen to my ramblings, and I'm really grateful. But if you like them and you think other people would like them, please give them a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and perhaps take a little bit of time and trouble to write something nice about what you think about them there, and indeed on social media, because it just helps to spread the word in a very crowded marketplace. Thank you ever so much. I'm also a comedian. You can go to twitch.tv/XSMalarkey to find out all about my comedy club, which is every week in Manchester on a Tuesday night at 8 p.m. at the Bread Shed in Manchester. But the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/XSMalarkey, has a monthly show on the first Sunday of every month at 8 p.m. GMT. But there's also all the time up there are clips from the various shows we did during lockdown, featuring all sorts of brilliant comics from around the world. And it's a fantastic not-for-profit comedy club that's been running for nearly 25 years now. And actually during recent months we've had on our live stage Joe Lycett, Nish Kumar and many more, and we support grassroots comedy too. So if you like that sort of thing, do again check that out. We don't have an advertising budget or anything, so spreading the word also helps. Thank you. There are worlds out there where the sky is burning, where the sea's asleep and the rivers dream. People made of smoke and cities made of song. Somewhere there's danger. Somewhere there's injustice. And somewhere else the tea's getting cold. I love you, Doctor Who. I really do. I don't care